The Extreme Robots road to the European Championship has already moved to Newcastle and onwards, but for non-subs of Extreme Robots TV, the last thing we all saw was the live stream action which went down in Guildford. The anticipated debuts of robots like Oblivion and Afterchop, the return of legends such as King Buxton, and appearances from Extreme Robots' favorite machines such as Zadkiel and Eruption were all featured here. We also had 3 more team points on the line, 2 Extreme Robots championships to defend, and even the return of free agents with Fight Club melees. Lots to talk about on the June stop for Extreme Robots, so let's dive in right now at the Combot Collective.
Welcome to the Combot Collective.
Hello everybody once again, and welcome back to the Combot Collective. Slowly but surely bring everything you want to know about the world of robot combat, from the heavyweight class to the flyweight class. And the UK heavyweight season for 2024 is now in full swing, as since our last episode on TCC in June, 2 Extreme Robots events and the first MechMania event have taken place, with the second Extreme Robots event of the 2 now having episodes shared on ExtremeRobots.tv. This means the Combot Collective is once again playing catch-up here as we discuss Extreme Robots Guildford, but we're not going to be behind for long. After Team Inferno dominated the team class and Zadkiel dominated the spinners class, with Team Inferno taking 2 of the 3 team points in stop 1, while Zadkiel, our spinners champion, went 3-0. Both now showed up to Guildford in the Spectrum, where we will jump right into some robot combat discussion here. Hopefully no 50-minute episode this time. We discussed stop 1, already stop 3 has happened, so let's speed it up. Stop 2 time, let's start talking about Extreme Robots Guildford. So perhaps the most interesting thing about this stop at Guildford was the return of the Fight Club melees. I mentioned in our intro, but yes, the change mentioned last episode of no more free agents was a change to last only 1 stop, it seems, as so many robots showed up to this event. Certainly not a bad problem to have though. The more robots, the better. This meant the fight clubs would be necessary once again though for the lower tier robots such as Audacious and Weird Malice. And speaking of Audacious, it's time for the Combot Collective to finally put a little bit of shine on Team Ironclad's signature middleweight. Normally, Audacious does not get discussed or ranked by the Combot Collective, but with the recent announcement by Robots Live and Mech Plus that Audacious will be one of the 30 robots partaking in the main MechMania field, a heavyweight championship field, this means we're going to be treating Audacious like the heavyweight it always fights as this year. Unfortunately, this doesn't necessarily mean success though, as in its only Fight Club melee, it would lose the TR4 in quite the mismatch for a Fight Club battle. Audacious's weapon just looked weak, not much impact, hopefully something it can change down the line. But the much more interesting of our 2 free agents that did not partake in the main shows would definitely be one Aftershock. Rising from the broken ashes of the former Robot Wars finalist destroyed by Zadkiel last year comes a new second version designed specifically for sportsman combat. As the Robot Wars Series 9 grand finalist, Aftershock is now Afterchop, the much more quaint Axbot. Now, despite being a free agent here, this robot will surely one day be a part of the main field and will be most certainly part of Team Quake. But given that this debut had quite a few delays, it does not surprise me that Will Thomas wanted to take it easy and debut Afterchop in some practice matches instead. Sadly, just like with Audacious though, this robot really did not deliver much with its weapon at all, with the axe being much more like Two-Headed Death Flamingo or even like Dead Blow more than it was like Thor or Implosions. The axe was weak and its performance was also very weak, and a JD loss for its sole fight of the weekend. Hopefully we'll see more of this robot down the line. But that's our 2 free agents out of the way. Now we are on to discuss our 4 main teams and robots which all appeared on ExtremeRobots.tv's first ever event. 23 in all, so let's get moving here, starting with the newest team in the Extreme Robots field, Team Wolfpack once again. And usually when we talk about a team first, it means they did not do too well. And here, once again, that's true. Team Wolfpack went in an astoundingly weak 2-18 over the entire 3-show weekend. Probably the worst winning percentage we've seen from one of these teams at a stop. And for the 4 robot Team Wolfpack, we kick things off with the team's newest robot, Troublemaker. a recent Extreme Robots regular which had some promising moments in 2023. Remember that one big tag match it had? But honestly, it mainly served as a bit of a field filler due to some serious technical gremlins which plagued Troublemakers so badly that it missed a couple of shows in 2023. 2024 was a new year for it, but in fight number 1, it seemed like nothing had changed at all. Issues forced it into a late KO in its comeback melee, and 3 more losses would follow this, 2 of them also coming by way of knockout, with Beast even sending it out of the arena at one point to kick off show number 2. Its highlight was in show 3 where it teamed with Mega Mouse, making it to 3 minutes but not doing much else in a 2-on-2 loss. The robot has promise, looks great, but stuff needs fixing. I also, side note, always think it's on fire thanks to that light under its flipper, so I'm always really worried about it, even though usually it's something else that's causing the issues with this robot. Next up though, we got Mega Mouse. Yes, Mega Mouse this time, coming back as it seems like the Bad Mouse moniker was dished after just one event. Perhaps the team thought it was bad luck? Well, it turns out the name change did not do much better here, as this event was even worse for the low-pressure flipper than stop number 1, and its event kicked off with the same strong start to its weekend, though, getting another knockout over Ripper, an even more impressive one than their knockout in Brentwood. Mega Mouse then took this momentum into the show 1 Gladiator melee and held its own against Tectonic and Gabriel, but ultimately lost in a judge's decision. All down here, sadly, for Team Outlaw. It had an Extreme Robots title match in show number 2, which it lost, followed by a couple of 2v2s and one-on-one losses, which brought Mega Mouse to yet another losing weekend at 1 win and 5 losses. But now, onto the robot which perhaps stands as the Iron Man of this young Extreme Robots season, the purple front hinge flipper named Leviathan. This robot fought a whopping 7 times at Extreme Robots Brentwood and almost kept up to that pace here with 6 fights over the weekend, albeit while having the same lack of success. Leviathan kicked off its week in a warm-up Fight Club melee where it got knocked out by TR4, its only knockout loss of the weekend. Then a winless show 1 would put Leviathan at 0-3 for the weekend before finally, on show number 2 against TR4, the robot which defeated it to start the weekend, Leviathan picked up its first victory. It was a controversial one by judge decision, one where TR4 outflipped Leviathan, but Leviathan had more control, giving it just the slightest edge. Not an exciting remainder for the weekend though for the purple robot. It lost a one-on-one against Ripper and then appeared in show 3's Gladiator melee, but failed there too, ending its week at 1 wins and 5 losses as well. But with all hope lost for Team Wolfpack, a team with only 2 wins with our first 3 robots, they still had the champ. During Brentwood's stop last April, the defending Extreme Robots champion at the time, Tectonic, had its first defense of the year, a highly contested meeting between it and our new champion, Iron 6, who managed to take out Tectonic to become a first-time champion. Iron would defend the title once against Ripper and Brentwood, but that was it. And after 2 months break, it was time to get back to work for Team Iron, and Iron's first opponent would be a doozy, the ace of Extreme Robots, Eruption. This championship defense against the 2-time TCC number 2 rank was not a bad performance by Iron 6 by any means. It did go 3 for 4 on flip attempts, but very early into the battle, one of the flipper bungees on Iron 6 would snap, and this would eventually cost Iron, who surprisingly self-righted a few times before being overcome by the power of both Major Damage and Eruption, who after a knockout had become the new Extreme Robots heavyweight champion, stripping Team Wolfpack away from the only thing they had left. And from here, things just got worse for the damaged Iron 6, who was more or less relegated to a Robot Wars Series 10 version of itself for the rest of the weekend, with its flipper barely working as it lost to robots such as Poseidon, Manta, and once again Eruption to end the week, putting it at 0-4 in Guildford. What an awful performance for Team Wolfpack. Surely only one way to go here, but up at least, right? Maybe they can pull some big names during the transfer window and really shake things up for the team. We now move on to the former lovable losers of the Extreme Robots Mountain, now a team which sat at number 2 entering this event and leaving this event, holding a distant second place with just 1 point thanks to Gabriel of all robots. This meant that Team Divinity did not accumulate any points over this weekend, but it did stand pat with a tough but par level 4-19 record, with some robots struggling and one new robot joining their squad. And that one newbie would be Oblivion, a wicked looking brand new heavyweight from Team Collingwood Carnage, the same student ran team which brought us the Robot Wars Grand Finalist Traction 7 years ago at Robot Wars Series 10. We'll be going more into detail on Oblivion during our MechMania preview video, our next video if all goes right. But how did it do at its Extreme Robots debut? Not good. Not good at all. We're not going to rag on Oblivion or Collingwood for this. It's a young team still, and one that hadn't fought heavyweights for 7 years, but 0-3 is 0-3, even though 2 of its losses did come in fairly harmless warm-up Fight Club battles. It did have one main show televised matchup though, a 2-on-2 against Team Inferno, one where Oblivion had some stage fright, suffering from immediate drive and weapon issues, allowing Beast to easily wedge under Oblivion, sending it out of the arena in seconds. What a rude welcome. But now we move on to the regulars of Team Divinity, where we have the veteran Saint, who after a shockingly impressive 2-2 Brentwood, its best event since returning, it's now back to being a lovable loser with an 0-5 weekend. It was a mere flipping target in its first melee, which kicked off the whole weekend. Then it weighed down Ripper in its first tag battle of the weekend. Then had a couple of nothing fights in show number 2 before ending its week at show number 3 with another melee where it fought primarily flipper robots as Tectonic and Eruption pretty much played past the barrel with the Team Divinity Twackbot. No carry jobs or lucky KOs this time for Saint. Maybe July will be a bounce back. Stay tuned. But now, before we get to Saint's brother, we're on to the de facto ace of Team Divinity, the longtime face of the UK Live Tour and Extreme Robots, Ripper. The Robot Wars veteran looked very strong in the last show, despite what its record said, almost winning the Extreme Robots title a second time in the process on show number 3. And you know, Ripper would do similar here, going 2-3 overall, sadly losing when it mattered most once again. Like I mentioned, Ripper would kick off its weekend with an embarrassing knockout loss against Megamouse, then follow that up with a 2-2 loss where it had to team up with Saint, just discussed that, but it would pick up a couple of wins. One in a melee where John Finlay defeated his son Ollie for the first time, and one where Leviathan suffered against Ripper in a brutal one-on-one where Ripper outclassed the newer robot in every sense. But now from the ace of Team Divinity, we now go to Team Divinity's Captain Robot, Gabriel. The Robot Wars All-Star who was responsible for Team Divinity's sole point. Gabriel, 2023's second lowest TCC ranked robot, was able to keep its bounce back year going in some sorts, picking up a win once again, this time versus Mega Mouse and Troublemaker by judge's decision, but this solid tag victory would then be followed by 5 losses. Though one of these losses I'd argue was quite controversial because, in my opinion, Team Divinity probably should have taken home yet another point in this weekend. In show number 1's Gladiator Melee, Gabriel dominated the first half of the fight, easily winning a judge's decision over Mega Mouse and Tectonic, then looked very impressive versus the Advantage Robot Implosion for 2 straight minutes. But shockingly, the judges would side with the Team Inferno robot as if they needed the helper points. Frustrating week overall for Gabriel, but there is some merit, still some improvement compared to 2023. And finally, our 5th and final robot on Team Divinity would be Axel, the former Ripper 7 turned traditional Axbot, kind of like Afterchop. Seems the Axbot revolution is taking over big time in the UK. But in Brentwood, it felt like the robot was still far from being even close to competitive, and while its 1-3 record from Guildford suggested not much change from that, it did look much better here in the second stop. Its show 1 melee saw it land some serious axe strikes on some fortunately shaped robots and Weird Malice and King Buxton, but it still lost on a close judge's decision. Show 2, though, finally saw Axel pick up a victory in the aforementioned 2-on-2 where Gabriel picked up its sole win as both Wicked Blades tore down Mega Mouse and Troublemaker. Show 3 saw Axel fight twice, first losing a melee against Manta, and then Axel closed out the entire show, standing in as Divinity's 3rd and final Gladiator melee combatant. It made the most of its time by shocking Manta and Leviathan in a judge's decision for the first half, but then got thrown out of the arena in seconds by Eruption, leaving Team Divinity pointless over the weekend in Guildford. Next, we move on to the Shock-led Team Quake, who we already discussed a little bit with the aforementioned Afterchop. No Afterchop here though, but Team Shock's trio of flippers were present alongside TR4 and a brand new member of the team, the legendary King Buxton. This squad had a very respectable weekend, going 9-13 overall, much better than the prior two squads, and this roster may have very well finished above 500 if it wasn't for our first robot to discuss, Poseidon. Now, I don't fully blame Poseidon. For most of 2023 and 2024, prior to this event, Poseidon has been a proper force of nature for Team Quake, even finishing Brentwood as the best performing robot on the Team Quake roster. But here, it went a horrendous 2-5, easily its worst outing yet in its short career. Outside of its dominance, 2-on-2 wins alongside TR4 over Team Wolfpack, this robot did its best and held its own, but was outmatched every step of the way. It lost its first two melees against Team Inferno robots, then rep Team Quake in the Show 2 Gladiator melee, where it defeated Iron On Ripper, only to get knocked out fairly quickly by Ignition. It then went 0-2 on Show number 3 in a 2v2 and an Extreme Robots title match against Eruption, so it blew that championship chance there. Tough weekend for Poseidon. And hey, speaking of Eruption, now on to its main rival nowadays, the former Extreme Robots champion Tectonic. Team Shock's workhorse flipper had an awful Brentwood where it immediately lost its Extreme Robots title and overall could only muster up one victory over the month. More of the same here though, sadly for Tectonic. Much similarly to Poseidon, it ended up finishing its Guildford tour with 1 win and 4 losses. It looked weak in the very first fight of the weekend, a melee versus Implosion, then looked even worse during the Show number 1 Gladiator melee where it couldn't even take out Mega Mouse. Tectonic did get a lucky one-on-one win midway through versus Gabriel, albeit with some struggles, and then it sandwiched off its weekend with 2 more losses against rival Eruption in a melee, and then in a very controversial 2-on-2 where it partnered with King Buxton to be a tag team of true workhorse robots, but more on that fight later. Thankfully, where Poseidon and Tectonic suffered, the most powerful robot on Team Quake and Team Shock, Manta, would pick up the ball left in Brentwood and continue running with it, going 2-1 over the weekend. This flipper is on the quest to fight Eruption for that Extreme Robots title, and that is something I would expect to see soon after its first 2 wins over Gabriel, then Weird Malice, among others in a melee to start 2-0. But once again, Team Quake came so close, but so far away from scoring team points during Manta's final outing in the 3rd and final Gladiator melee of the weekend. I already mentioned who won the first stage of this melee, Axel, which in turn meant that Manta did pretty rough here, able to bully Leviathan, but struggling against the X-Bot, leading to a whimper end via judge's decision lost for Manta. But now, our candidate for most improved robot from month to month on this team would have to be TR4, as after a very uneventful 2023 and early 2024, this robot really found itself in Guildford. It all started with TR4 appearing in its first ever Fight Club melee, working out the kinks versus the likes of Leviathan and Thunderchild, and this fed right into its main show performance as right out the gate TR4 win a pair of 2-on-2s against Team Wolfpack, helping Poseidon find a little bit of success along the way, but it would be halted by Leviathan in the Show 2 1-on-1, a frustrating battle where TR4 went 3 for 7 on flip attempts. And then TR4 tried to get revenge on Leviathan in a melee, but only managed to lock up its motors in the process, leading to a lot of repairs and build up to Show 3, but it did end its week with another 2-on-2 win alongside Poseidon. So 3-2 over the weekend, fairly impressive for TR4. Well, now finally we close out Team Quake with another 2024 Extreme Robots debutee, one of my all-time favorite robots and a machine which has fought literally longer than I've been alive, my boy, King Buxton. Just like Oblivion, I'm going to be getting into proper detail with King Buxton in our upcoming MechMania preview, but here we're focusing on Extreme Robots, and just like Manta, the King would go a very respectable 2-1 over robots much, much newer than it. It had a phenomenal start, entering its first melee like a house of fire, bullying every robot and even lifting Axel completely off the ground in a big-time judge's decision win, and then in Show 3 managed to overcome a very tough and awkward challenge in Gabriel. My big note though is its second fight, one I've briefly mentioned already, the 2-on-2 where Buxton and Tectonic fought Thunderchild and Eruption. King Buxton shockingly did much better versus Eruption than many robots ever had done versus it, even lifting the King of Europe completely on a couple of occasions, but shockingly, the judges again leaned Team Inferno, King Bee looked unstoppable for the whole duration of the battle, and Thunderchild was taken out of play early. Another questionable call by the judges, one of quite a few during this Guildford event. But speaking of Team Inferno, here we finally turn to them, the dominant Oates family-led squad that wasn't even halted by the additions of some of the lower-tier robots like Thunderchild and Weird Malice to their roster. As Team Inferno, competing as an entire unit, made this entire stop look like a repeat of the 2022 Extreme Robots team season, as Guildford saw the squad manage to take all 3 team points available at this event, giving Team Inferno a 4-point advantage entering the July Newcastle show. Overall, the team went an astonishing 17-5 amongst the 6 robots within its ranks, though after 3 years of these insane records, is 17-5 really that much of a surprise at this point? As we kick off for my candidate on this team's most improved, shockingly, yes, these Team Inferno robots can improve somehow. We have the front hinged Ignition, who after a bad showing in Brentwood had team captain Michael Oates admitting at the start of the event that Ignition was easily the robot he had the least faith of on his entire team. And while this wasn't a perfect outing, Ignition proved it still can be one to watch with a 2-1 weekend. Just like in Brentwood, this robot kicked off the entire show with a melee victory in what was the very first fight of show number 1, and then it closed out show number 1 by appearing last in the Gladiator melee, eliminating Poseidon for its first knockout win of the year. Day 2 would see it in another melee, but drive issues would hinder it, allowing Manta to win a judge's decision, and this forced Ignition out of the event due to damages, allowing Eruption to sub in for it, which I'm just sure Michael Oates was so heartbroken by. Oh no, replace it with Eruption, ooh. But hey, I gotta ask, is it somehow possible for the Extreme Robots title to now be defended within team ranks, since the European Championship looks to be ditching the teams for pure championship combat? I bring this up because outside of our champion, no other robot did better than the Axbot Implosion at this event, who went an astonishing 6-1 on the weekend, a far cry from its winless beginnings in 2023. Implosion looked explosive and reliable all weekend, from its first battle, a one-on-one against Tectonic that was nearly a knockout, to the Gladiator melee where it defeated a very game Gabriel, to even 2-on-2 action where Implosion worked with Beast in show number 3 to defeat Gabriel and Oblivion with the greatest of ease. 6 victories, all by judge's decision. That's 12 points on the TCC rankings. No jokes here. Next up, we go to the one-time outsider of Team Inferno. Once bringing losses to this team, now dominant as ever, we move on to Beast, who is now driven by Ollie Finley, son of John Finley, and after a tough first year, is really coming into his own on Team Inferno, having gone 3-0 at the last Extreme Robots stop in Brentwood. This stop was another 3-fight affair and still a successful one, leaving with a winning record yet again, despite not looking as good as it did in Brentwood. In its first fight of the week, it appeared in a 2-on-2 against Team Divinity, where for the first time ever, Ollie Finley would battle against his father John with the robot he grew up cheering for, Ripper. This was a solid fight, but with Ollie's Beast having the far superior tag partner over John's Ripper, Ollie would take round 1 over his Pops. This was followed by a loss in show 2 to Ripper, Beast's first knockout loss of the year in a melee, and then it ended with Beast welcoming Oblivion to Extreme Robots with a rapid out of the arena into the Flame Pit, allowing it to end the week at a strong 2-1. But now, before we get to the centerpiece of Team Inferno, let's look at the 2 new lovable underdogs that have joined this elite squad. Starting with the 20-plus-year-old flipper Weird Malice, who despite missing stop number 1, still remained virtually unchanged from his 2023 guys outside of a little bit of a boost in flipper power that showed off as it kicked off its week 1-0 with a very impressive Fight Club melee outing, one which kept Weird Malice on the Inferno roster for the week's remainder. Sadly, in Weird Malice fashion, once it got to battles which actually meant something, it faltered and served more as the targeted rather than the targeter. It struggled against Axel and Leviathan in show 1, missed show 2 completely, then appeared in show 3 twice where it will be thrown out of the arena, first by Manta, then once more by a TR4 to close out a 1-3 weekend. But now let's go over to my boy Joseph Jack Prophet, making a profit with another respectable week with Thunderchild, another robot which is going to be having a very busy year with both dates confirmed at Extreme Robots and MechMania. As always, here at the Combot Collective, we give a huge shout out to Team Ironclads. Without their amazing footage, we would be seeing little to nothing of the UK tour over the last few years, and their footage of the Fight Club Melees is especially paramount for these videos. And speaking of the Fight Club Melees, it did not do too well in them this time around, going 0-1 in the aforementioned Weird Malice Melee. It did make it on TV though, just once during the also aforementioned 2-on-2 featuring Eruption, King Buxton, and Tectonic. Not the best outing for Thunderchild, being knocked out early, but it was at the right place at the right time, taking the win and finishing the week. But now, last, but certainly not least, with BattleBots taking a back seat, it is the one and only machine which I anticipate to finally place number 1 overall after 3 years of TCC rankings. It's the defending Robot Wars champion and now defending Extreme Robots champion, Team Invade's ace, Eruption. The sky is truly the limit for this machine, having now also been confirmed for MechMania. Who knows how many accolades it will take before the year is over? Though, as I mentioned plenty already, its newest accolade would be the fact it is now a 2-time Extreme Robots heavyweight champion after its victory over Iron 6 on show number 1. Eruption went 5 for 7 on flip attempts in this battle, looking much better than its all-red opponent, as with a little bit of help from Major Damage, it busted Iron 6's flipper very early, forcing a knockout and a change in the XR title guard. Eruption is our new Extreme Robots heavyweight champion, and one I don't expect to change anytime soon. After its knockout victory, Eruption then fired off 6 straight judges' decision wins in 2-on-2s, 1-on-1s, title defenses, and even gladiator melees to position itself firmly at the top of the sport with an astonishing 12-win, 0-loss record to start off the year. From Ripper to Tectonic to Gabriel to even King Buxton, questionably, we saw Eruption dominate them all and lead Team Inferno to a 5-1 to 0-0 lead 2 shows in. But that's team play out of the way. Now, to close it up with the good stuff, we go to the Spinners class. And while the ecosystem in the Sportsman class has shuffled quite a bit between these first 2 Extreme Robots events, not as much can be said about the full combat division. Only 3 robots are here once again, the champion Zadkiel, the hyped up challenger Talio, and for the first time ever this year, Donald Thump at Extreme Robots. And let's start things off talking about the former Robot Wars fan favorite who made its yearly debut a little bit later than usual after almost 6 months off from its last event in Dublin. Like many other robots, this one is also scheduled for MechMania, interestingly enough, as the only spinner in the 30 robot field. More on that in our MechMania preview video. But here at Extreme Robots, just like every other improving spinner, it was fed to Zadkiel as the presidential punter resumed its one-sided rivalry with the Angel of Mercy in a pair of Extreme Robots spinner title matches, and Donald Thump was aggressive in both fights, throwing sparks and even knocking Zadkiel back during the show number 2 match. But both of these battles ended just like every other Zadkiel fight had ended at this point, with a knockout in under a minute for the Team Divinity robot. So no gold for Donald Thump, unsurprisingly. Now let's talk about the robot everyone knew about entering this event, Talio, who was appearing for its 3rd tour stop in its career. This robot was hyped up quite a bit on Extreme Robots social media before this event, where it was shared that the Talio appearing in Guildford was supposed to be a much better robot than the one we saw 2 events prior, given the added test time at the Extreme Robots HQ the team had received. And what Extreme Robots saw was enough to apparently give Talio a championship match once again on show number 3, and this was going to be the only battle Talio had to prepare for. And that brings us to Zadkiel, who sits alongside the American Manta as Eruption as TCC number 1 overall contenders, and it stood strong entering this event as our 3-0 Spinners champion to nobody's surprise. Just like in early 2023, this robot has dominated over what is honestly not the strongest of fields, and with Donald Thump and Talio, similar opposition was lined up for Zadkiel and Guildford. We already discussed its 2 warm-up defenses against Donald Thump, dominant as ever despite a little bit of offense from the traditional Team Ballistics vert. But now it was on to the title defense we were promised on Instagram, Zadkiel versus the new and improved Talio. Bring out the fight graphic. And hey, Talio provides Zadkiel with its biggest challenge yet here. What does that exactly mean? Well, still not really much of a challenge at all. Despite this new and improved Talio being a little bit sturdier, that added robustness only really matters when your robot can move, and for most of this fight, Talio did not move. Zadkiel ended up knocking out Talio, not under a minute this time, but under 2 minutes. Progress may still be progress for Talio, who continues its road to the European Championships, but Zadkiel now 6-0, defending the belt. So that wraps up another TCC covering the Extreme Robots season here. A little bit shorter this time too, thankfully, as we are catching back up to the episodes currently airing on ExtremeRobots.tv from Newcastle. You can check out that footage right now on ExtremeRobots.tv. We're going to have it linked in the description below. The brand new free FREE Extreme Robots streaming service, which has featured some very well produced content thus far, with much, much more to come, it seems. In review here, though, for Guildford, Team Inferno sweeps team play to give the Oates family squad a 4-point lead over second-place Team Divinity, well on their way to a third straight annual cash prize. And if that prize wasn't enough, Eruption wins the Extreme Robots title for a second time ever, defending it against 2 robots later in the week, and now entering July undefeated, just like Zadkiel, who is 6-0 this year with every battle it's had being a title match, a successful one at that too, obviously. But next time we talk here at the Combot Collective, we are going to be covering MechMania, previewing MechMania, and then covering Newcastle, a very interesting event for Extreme Robots, where one, Ogrekill, a robot that once applied for BattleBots, I believe they actually applied for BattleBots a couple of times, will be finally making its heavyweight debut. Maybe finally a challenge for Zadkiel. Only time will tell here at the Combot Collective as we start to wrap this one up here. Thank you guys so much for watching another TCC breakdown video. Hopefully 2 in August, 1 for the MechMania preview, 1 for Newcastle, and more to come. We got a lot to talk about. We still got to talk about Proving Grounds, Robo Games. So much to catch you guys up on. We're so excited here at the Combot Collective, slowly but surely putting out content this year. We hopefully can see you guys in the future. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check out our Discord and Facebook page. More updates happen there than on the YouTube page, to be honest. We got news posts there, live stream updates there, the likes, and then we also have a Discord server. We have numerous builders chatting there, numerous fans of Robot Combat chatting there. Whenever we post videos on TCC, they get announced there first. So plenty of incentive to check out the TCC Discord server. Bring some life to the server, guys. I'd love to see that. But for now, at the Combot Collective, we are wrapping it up right here. Thank you guys so much for another great episode, and we will see you guys during our MechMania preview.
This was the Combot Collective. Find us on Instagram and Discord.